r/Nosleep, posted by Reddit user G_A93. In Mr. Hoffsetters Carnival, you must follow these rules to ride. Part 3. As we turned around and looked, we saw a figure enshrouded by the shadows. When it came closer, we saw a little girl. She was in a periwinkle dress and had platinum blonde hair, ice-cold blue eyes, and a look on her face that gave every puppy on earth a ride for their money. She was the most perfect child I'd ever seen.
"Please, help me. I'm lost, I need help,"
she cried. At this point in the story, I'm assuming you expect Darla to direct us out of harm's way, huh? Grabbing my hand and pulling me to safety. Unfortunately, that is not what happened. We both stared at this little girl, hanging on her every word as she came closer and closer. I finally broke her trance after replaying the rules in my head. "Darla!" I screamed as I pulled her arm to follow me. But she broke her arm away from my grip. "Darla?" I said, trying to find my friend in the dark caverns that were now her eyes. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there looking at me. The little girl then directed her gaze at me.
"Please, don't be mean."
"I'm lost, don't you get it? Won't you help me?"
she said once again, this time her voice melding into something demonic. And then the little girl morphed into something horrific. It started with her neck cracking to an unusual angle. It was not humanly possible for it to twist and distort like that. I knew that much. Her eyes began to roll back into the back of her head, and large chunks of flesh started to burn off her face. The once stunning blonde hair now falling out rapidly, leaving large patches of empty space, only covered in welts and scars. She began laughing, like a patient in the insanity ward. She cackled. Her laugh was so inhumane. I felt like I could have categorized it as a sound from Lucifer in the Old Testament. As she continued to laugh, her jaw widened, almost like it unhinged, exposing rows and rows of horribly jagged teeth. All this time, Darla just stood there watching me. I tried and begged for her to run. I tried grabbing her, but to no avail. She was no longer Darla. She was a part of the carnival. The now grotesque creature seeming to have finished its transformation as it began walking closer to me and Darla, snarling and laughing with a sinister look on its face. Eyes still rolled back into her skull.
"Please, Darla, we gotta go, please."
"Please, please,"
the monster mocked, inching closer to us every second. It was then that I made the hardest decision I have ever made in my young life. I began to run. I ran and ran until I knew I had put some distance between me and that thing. When I took a moment to look back, I saw the monster open its mouth fully. God, it had to have been 3 feet wide. Teeth, all pointing at Darla. I turned away and continued running. I must have ran to the other side of the carnival before hitting the fence and collapsing to the ground. I cried. I cried for my friends. I cried for the decision we made to come here. I cried that things were so scary. I just cried. I was terrified. I'm man enough now to admit it. What I never told anyone, until this post, was that I didn't want to die at the hands of those fucking carnival creatures. I wouldn't let them do it. So I made my way atop of a tall ride, and as I climbed up, I felt streams of tears falling back down to earth. And as I looked down, I saw some stilt walkers doing their rounds. I was at the tip top of the ride. My breath was shaky. Tears were running quicker down my cheeks. I took one more look out of that cursed carnival, closed my eyes, and let go. The fall was slow yet somehow quick. The first half felt like a series of my life flashing before my eyes. Every argument I had with friends and family, every hug, every smile. The second half felt like I hit the fast forward button as I slammed headfirst into a dirt patch and the lights went out. Now I don't know the way it works, whether I died or not, but almost instantly I became conscious. Now staring at the ride I just climbed up, I was dumbfounded. I know what I'd just done. I felt every raw emotion one could feel as they tried killing themselves. What the hell went wrong? "You're that low, kid, huh?" A familiar voice rang out to me.
Lenny?
I quivered out. Lenny the clown was standing as he always did, cool, calm, and collected. "You know," he said, lighting a cigarette in his mouth, "this place wasn't all ghouls, monsters, and bullshit, kid. We were a carnival at one point, full of fun and laughter. Kids running up and down the tent areas, families eating and drinking together, enjoying one another." Lenny took a long drag of his cigarette, and then some bearded broad came running through town, and we'd already had that act come and go, and never did well. We're a carnival, entertaining, not a freak show. She showed up one day, making demands that old man Hoff hire her, make some sort of changes. I don't know, kid. I don't get into the politics. He, of course, said no, and we all suffered the consequences.
Consequences?
I asked, intrigued. "Yeah, kid. She came back the next day around closing time. Only this time she looked far more ugly. Demonic, even. As we tried to file out of the area, we noticed one of us couldn't leave. It was like an invisible barrier keeping us in there. And we began with complaints and insults, but she put a stop to that real quick. And she grabbed a woman from the staff and vomited all over her head, the vial melting away the woman's skin. And then her skull. She waved her hands at the clowns and they became one with the shadows. And they could either work for her or drown forever in the blackness, never to feel anything again but hunger and thirst, only quenched when they trap other souls into the shadows. And luckily I was having a smoke. Yeah, one by one she tortured us into compliance. Even Hoff. He still gets to be the main attraction, but he's just as terrified as everyone else.
But why? Why is she doing this? Why to us? We did nothing to her. We're just kids.
I shouted. You want the truth, kid? It's because she can. It's because she loves chaos more than anything. You guys were a sharp bunch, but you think you were the first ones? She's got a long line of missing children posters under her belt, kid, Lenny said coldly. You gotta play the rules, kid. You gotta win if you want a chance to see home again. It's too late for me, pal. But you? He paused with a slight chuckle. You got a chance. Lenny confirmed what was already very apparent. You could not kill yourself out of this hell. You could not escape. Either you're in, or you're out. And if you want out, you've got to play their game. Well, kid, I'm down to my last puff. I wish you the best, kid, I really do. I hope to never see your face around here again, Lenny said, with a half-hearted chuckle, as he walked into the tents and dissipated in it. And just then, I heard sounds coming from a tent just behind me. The sign read, games and stuff. It was the largest tent in the entire carnival, and for some reason I knew this was the stage I had been looking for. That last fucking carny was in there that could help me find that fucking bear. As I stepped into the tent, I saw rows and rows of games. Arcade games rusted to hell, still somehow functioning. There was a dunk tank where a small boy sat atop the platform, shaking in fear. In the water there looked to be some sort of fish. Piranhas, maybe. They had a ring toss, balloon popping games, and even that fishing game where you pick up a duck and win a prize. But these were no ducks. They were small hands floating by. I winced in fear, somehow motivating myself to keep walking the aisles looking for the bottle toss man. Every single game was more grotesque than the last. It was absolutely horrible. When I came around to finding the man, he had 3 balls in a bucket, looking over at my direction as if he knew I'd be there right on time.
"Here to try your luck, young man?"
he hissed from his booth. I saw the bottles I had to knock down. The simplest concept in the world. Except there was a gimmick, even at a normal carnival, and I expected no less here.
Could you help me find a white bear? It has the name.
Shh, the man said in a low tone.
You want help? You must play. Play my games, young man. Do it for those who can no longer escape.
I looked into this man's eyes. They reminded me of Lenny's. Less monstrous than the rest of the bunch around here. You were part of the carnival that got cursed, huh? I said with more confidence. The man looked stunned, but quickly changed his face back to the one of calm, and simply said,
No more questions, my boy. Now play or leave.
He hung the bucket of 3 balls in front of my face. Switch to the right hand, please, I said, noticing the bucket was in his left hand. He smiled with what seemed like relief, before switching hands and wishing me good luck. As I stood there, looking at the simple 3-bottle pyramid, I felt my guts inside me shift, my nerves on all 8 cylinders. I took the first ball in my hand. I wound up the ball and tossed it right where the 3 bottles met. Nothing. They didn't budge an inch. The man had a smile spring across his face, almost a forced one, looking like a painful emotion. As I picked up the second ball, I could see his mouth quivering, as if he knew a hilarious secret causing him to hold in a laugh. This time I wound up and put everything I had into hitting the bottom right bottle. Smack! I hit it square in the center of the bottle, but again, not even a wiggle. At this point, the man was howling, laughing. Bent over the table the bottles were on. His laugh was not one of pleasure, though. He had sad tears running down his face, and I could tell this was no pleasure to him. And though I was frustrated, I noticed something else as he was over there bent, laughing. I grabbed the last ball, my last lifeline to getting out of this nightmare. I tried shutting everything off. The arcade noises, the laughing man, everything. I took a deep breath. I wound up the ball, and, nearly snapping my shoulder, tossed that ball right at the legs of the table. Within an instant, the table legs shattered, causing the whole table to come down, destroying everything atop of it, including the bottles. The man stopped laughing abruptly. He looked in my direction with a look of hope.
Follow me,
he hissed out. We walked to the very end of the tent, where he slid back an old ticket booth, and there within that decrepit old time capsule was a fucking white bear, with that name stitched to its ear. And as I took it over to Burger Castle, I couldn't help but feel a terrible survivor's guilt. I had made it this far, but lost both of my closest friends. How would I explain this to anyone? To everyone. As I approached the castle restaurant, I saw that Mr. Hoffsetter was standing there. I felt like rushing him and choking him with my own hands. But something happened. I realized the hate in his eyes wasn't towards me. It was towards the situation. It was the role he could not ignore. He could not escape from. He didn't utter one word to me. He simply pointed atop the makeshift stairs and announced, "Coming down, Your Highness, Princess Maribel." A flurry of clapping erupted from behind me. I turned around in a panic, and I would have run if there was anywhere to run to. I was surrounded by all of them. Stilt walkers, mimes, clowns of all colors. Even the little girl who was now in her perfect little girl form. As the clapping slowed and eventually stopped, I turned back to see her. The bearded lady. She was the princess.
Why, thank you, young man,
she said as she ripped the bear from my hands, the anger building in my veins. With that, she then ripped the arms from the bear, and then the head. And then, she ordered a mime to come over to her. They carried a sack, and inside were the arms of Russell and Darla's head, with a permanent look of terror on her face. The mimes made quick work of it, and sewed the body parts onto the bear.
Oh, now would you look at that? Perfection, I really must thank you,
she said to me. It took everything in my willpower not to jump and bite her face off. She then asked,
"Is there anything I can do to repay you?"
would like to go home, I said through gritted teeth. You would like to go home? What? She insisted. My heart was going to explode until I took a breath and muttered, Please. She smiled wickedly, then nodded her head towards the exit of the carnival. When I walked through the exit, I suddenly felt like I could actually breathe, as if the whole time I had been drowning in a shallow pool, and this was my first breath of real air. As I grabbed my bike to leave, I looked back. All the creatures were still looking at me, waving goodbye. In the coming months, I was questioned, accused, bullied, you name it. My friends' parents still believe to this day that I had something to do with their deaths. At the time, explaining it seemed stupid, and still does. You don't have to believe me. It's just I needed to get it out of me before it's too late. You see, I thought survivor's guilt was the easy part to get over. I thought maybe one day I'd be able to move on, live my life and be normal. But I can't. I have a constant battle in my mind, thinking of how gruesomely my pals had died. No one in town talks to me. I'm an outcast. I have no money to leave, and it doesn't help that the new candy shop opening in town is named Mr. Hoffsetters Candy Wonderland. So, I figured the best way to end survivor's guilt is to not survive. I'm sorry.